Okay, I will try to cover the rest of these slides before lunch, so that we can start on the new thing after lunch. Okay? Mm-hmm. Cool. So another thing that's important for you to know, and I'm not sure if you know it already or not, is you see that whenever you are inspecting different properties in your DevTools, then sometimes there is a little arrow. Do you know why? When there is an arrow and when there isn't? You can see there is no arrow there.
There's more properties in it.
Yeah, exactly. So there's an arrow if it's a shorthand what you're using. So what do you think padding stands for? What is it the shorthand of?
Top, right, bottom, left.
Exactly. So this will specify all of these different paddings for you, and padding can be specified in 4 different ways. You can write one property that will apply it to everywhere, and you should always think of the different directions like the clock. So you start from 12, right, and then top, right, bottom, left. Cool. Then, if you specify 2 properties, what do you think those will be? Yeah, it will be. It will be vertical, horizontal and vertical, right? And you start with vertical, which is, it sort of doesn't make sense in my mind because it should be x and y axis, but it's opposite. It's y axis and opposite, right? So this will make more sense if we do it like more and less, right? So 80 will be the top and the bottom, and 20 will be the left and the right. Cool. But to make it more complicated, you can also say, you can also specify 3 properties that will.
Top, right, bottom.
So the first one will be the top. The second one will be the 2 horizontal, so left and right. And the third one will be bottom. And that's because when you style things, then you normally will have the same padding and margin on the left and the right side. Yeah. But sometimes you have different on top and different on bottom. Sometimes you will want a padding top, or actually it makes more sense for margin, but like a margin top but margin bottom. Margin top 80 but margin bottom 0, for example. Then you could do this, for example. And just for you to understand, this can be whatever, right? So this can be ems and rems and percentage and viewport heights and whatever. Always, I'm just normally using pixels, but you can mix it up, right? You can write whatever you want in here, always. And if you write 0, then you don't need to use a measurement unit. Then you just write 0. Okay, and then the final one is 4 properties. That's kind of easy, I guess. So that's the 4 directions, right? Mm-hmm. So top, right, bottom, left. Yeah?
And what about inherited and other things?
Inherited, so if you don't... well, there are some properties that can be inherited from the parent. That would be font size, for example, line height, background, different things. Padding is not inherited, it's always specified on each element. But it will affect the children, right? It will visually, like the children will have the parents' padding, but they, like if you inspect it, then they will not. If that makes sense. This is the same with margin as well. So you can have just a single property that will affect all of them, 2 properties, that will affect vertical and horizontal, 3 that will be top, horizontal, bottom, and 4 which will be one for each direction. Cool. If you are ever in doubt about what's what, then you can just click on these small arrows in Chrome. Yeah, and it's the same for border. You can see that border is actually the shorthand for a lot of different properties. Also background, it has a lot of different properties that you can, and you can actually, like in here, you could have like a background image, something, and then you could say that it should be size cover and I don't know, 10 pixel from the top, something position. You can have a lot of also red. You can really like chain these different properties when you are using this is a JPEG, by the way, or something. So you can really chain properties when you use shorthands in general. Okay. Yes. So we have discussed all of these, and now one last thing I want to talk about is a property that is called box sizing. Has anyone familiarized themselves with this one before? Box sizing.
You have done it last time.
Did we do it last time?
Yes.
You did it last time.
No,
I did it.
yeah. Box sizing, border box.
Mhm.
But
Okay. Let's try to find an example of why this is important. So if let's say I have a main with two sections in here with like an H2 and the paragraph in here, and then just prettify. And then I copy this. So I have two sections and I want these to be next to each other. They aren't right now. So how would I do that? Just put this debug mode. So I have a main with two sections. I want them to be next to each other. What would I do? Very good. Display flex. Perfect. Okay, so I want my sections. I want my sections to have I have to have 50% of the width, although they sort of do already. But I want to explicitly specify, and yes, I want them to have a padding. I want the first section to have a padding, right, of, for example, 10 pixels, and I want the other one, yeah, exactly, a padding left of 10 pixels. Okay. And then I'm gonna say that my main, that should actually fill 80% of the body width and margin auto, so it's centered. Okay. Actually, I'm not sure if maybe Flexbox is handling this quite well, but I will try anyway. So that's the background of the main. The section, should have Hey Michael, welcome. I can't illustrate this with display flex because it's working too well.
Yeah.
So we have to go back to the old school way of doing this, and we'll say that the section should be display inline block. Okay, so you can see that, actually I'm just gonna do this a bit. So you can see that, okay, if I take the width down a bit, then it will jump next to each other. So it is sort of working, but
It's
not.
like you have no control.
Yeah, I want it to fill the whole thing, right? And why isn't it doing that? Well, it's doing that because on the two sections I have a left padding and a right padding, and that's messing up my width. So the width is calculated. They also have a width of 50%, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because they have a padding, if the what's it called, the box sizing is set to content box, which is the default in browsers, then the width will be calculated like width and the padding on top of that. And I don't want that. I don't want to have to write that the width should be, because I don't know if you have met this calc before in CSS, but you can actually say, you can actually tell the browser that this is because when you use display inline block, then it will add some I think like 2 or something extra pixels after each column. So that's a whole another thing of CSS mess, but you will not have to think about it with display inline blocks. But anyway, so if we say that 50% minus the padding and the display inline block thing, then it will jump next to each other. But I don't want to have to think about this all the time. I want to just be able to write 50% and then it should jump, right? Then if I specify box sizing border box, I never memorized this. This is also something that's part of every single project of mine that I have worked on. So what you basically do, yeah, exactly. This is the one that I normally have. So if we go back to the Visual Studio project, I would have a file called box sizing CSS, and in there, that's the only thing I would have. And this will, can you explain what this is doing?
All.
Yeah, that's the all selector.
Yeah.
So it's basically saying that the HTML, the outermost HTML element, should have a box sizing of border box, and then everything that is a before element or an after element should inherit, and it will inherit it from their parent or ancestor, right? And it will always be, like, in the end, the HTML that they come to. And this way, everything will have border box sizing border box. So let's just try to paste that in here. So if we say the HTML should be box sizing border box, and then I'll make a new selector, which is this everything before, everything after should be box sizing. What was that? Can you
For the
remember?
rows. Yeah.
Inherit, yeah.
Inherit.
And then, again, this is a bit difficult to illustrate because I'm using inline block is adding a few pixels extra. So I do need to do the calc thing anyway, but at least not with 10 pixels, but just like with 3. So now you see that if it's not messing up, inline block is not messing me up, then now the width is calculated with like the padding is gonna be part of your calculated width, and that's really nice. So if I say 20, what is happening? Oh, yeah, of course, sorry. It's because I have such a tiny window that it doesn't have, so the content, it doesn't have, the words are too long, so that's why it was messing it up. So if you say, you see now the first section has 100 pixel right padding, and it's not affecting its width at all. Can you see that? And
Yes.
the reason why it's jumping down is because more words are going into new lines, but otherwise the padding is not affecting the width anymore. So what you need, the takeaway from this is, if you want to make your life easier, then have this snippet in every project of yours. This is sort of like a reset as well. So if you have your reset, if you have this one, then you're good to go.
So every time we should make a file with reset comment.
Yeah, it could just be something you copy paste from
Okay.
project to project.
And we should make a new file for resetting and another one for example this box sizing, and
Yeah.
then we just link it to our HTML.
Yeah,
file.
exactly. So
Then it works,
yeah,
right?
so can you help me link box sizing to my project here? What would I do?
Same.
Maybe we should go after reset.
Hmm?
You should link it after reset in this case too,
Well,
or it doesn't matter.
I think they are both generic files. They're both files that come from outside. They're doing different things, so they should not be overriding each other.
Okay.
Because box sizing is not specified in the reset files, so it's not going to be affecting each other. So in this case, it actually doesn't matter. It can be both before and after. So yeah. So-
box
Control
sizing.
Yeah, control space, and then I can see all my files and folders. So what matters is that you have, this is a comment by the way, I can't remember if we used it before. So these are generic reset files or styles. And these are, or that is, but if you have multiple, these are your custom styles, right? So that's what you normally would do in projects. Well, this is not actually what you would normally do, because you would normally compile your CSS files into one file, but you would order them in this way anyway.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay. So we are officially finished the slides from the first week. Good luck, Marco. All right. So we have a little more time before lunch. So if you're up for it, then I can show you a quick intro to transitions animation. That should not take that long, and then we have time for forms after lunch. Okay?
Yes.
All right. So has any one of you done some transitioning before Have you played around with that? Do you know what it's used for? What is it? So I try to do a shout out for my job again. Might as
Yeah,
well.
We don't want to be killed.
Yes, I did
please.
something. I did something, but I did it like when you were like moving something like in circle, or when
Yeah.
you start, it's kind
Yeah.
of just moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did something like that before.
Cool. So, for example, transitions, right? You do that to transition between one state and the other. So in here, when I open the navigation, you see that it goes down, and then the content of it also just slides in, right? So the fact that it not just when I'm clicking the button, it just appears all of it at the same time. That's done with transitions. So both that the menu is opening up and the content inside is opening up. That's done with transitions. Yeah?
Yeah.
Questions? Not yet?
But it will restore with some millisecond or something.
I can try to show you
Yeah.
what it's doing. So let's just maybe not. No, I'm not gonna inspect this one because it's too complex. I'll take as a more easy example. There are some other stuff, like for example this, right? That the modal comes in. That's also done with a transition. The fact that this stuff is fading in and out slowly. The text when it will change, and also the image. Can you see all that changing slowly? That is also done with transitions. So this is what basically gives life to a website. This is what makes it feel like instead of like a, like pictures after each other, a slideshow, right? Something that's a movement. Yeah, exactly. Also, like for example, oh, that's not working yet. For example, that stuff is it's not just like the whole everything is like from one state to the other. It's not happening like that. That's transitions. It's something that makes you feel nice, I guess. Yeah. So let's take a bit easier example. I guess one very simple, or maybe you can give me an example. Do you know where it's used? Like where would it make sense, do you think, to use it? Where do we have state changes on a website?
First, you open the website sometime
Yeah.
from the beginning.
Yeah, that would be an animation normally, because so there are two ways to animate your content on a website. One property is called animation, and the other one is called transition. Animation is what happens normally on load, and then transition is transitioning from state 1 to state 2. So, for example, on hover, on click, on
Active.
yeah, all of these things. Yeah. So what things have different states on a website?
Links.
Links, yeah. What else? Pictures sometimes, if you have a slideshow, yeah, that could be it. Buttons, right?
Yeah.
Buttons have also states. What about
Selected.
accordions, stuff that open up, right? Yeah, those are. Let's start with an easy one. Let's start with the link. So if I want a link, what do I write? A. Oh, I write. Okay. Can I write? Yeah. So click here. So that's my link. It's over there. Great. I want some spacing on the body, so the link is not all the way up in the corner. What would I add then to the body?
Margin or budget?
What do I want?
Yes.
I want it in my house. What is it
in
then?
my bedding.
Then it's padding, yeah? So I'll just add some 40 pixel. Cool. So if I want to target my link, what do I write? I want to select my link.
Okay.
And so when I'm doing transitions, I need to specify styles for the state before and the state after. So my default and my whatever state. So for example, if we have
But then you should do something before you should solo, maybe?
yeah, there will be some pseudo stuff going on. So let's say that the two states I want to transition between is default and hover, right? So when I'm hovering the link, that will be my to state. Yeah, that will be what I want to transition to. I don't need to specify what I want to transition to. I just need to specify two different states, and then the transitions will take effect automatically. So for example, if I specify my before state, I want the link to have text decoration none, because I don't like that. I also want it to have font size 20, so we can see it a bit better. I also want it to be bold. What do I write? Font weight. And what is it called? Bold. Perfect. Awesome. I don't like the color either. What would I write then if I want to change it? And do you know any good ones? Purple? I like that. We take the that's really ugly, I'm sorry. I'm gonna take another one. Do you know this one? It's pronounced badass. But it's written like 2 5s. That's kind of like a developable joke. It doesn't function that well on the projector, but we'll keep it. So that's my before state, right? Now we need to specify the after state. So I want it to turn red, because that's a pretty good contrast, so we can see it. That's not what you normally would do on a website. You would normally transition from green to darker green or lighter green or something like that, right? But we are going for the extremes here. So now I have specified the before and the after state. Try to look at the only thing I'm writing in the hover. I'm not writing anything about text decoration, font size, font weight. I'm only writing something on the color, right?
Yeah.
Why is that? Like, does that mean that the text decoration, font size, and all that will jump back when I hover, or will it stay the same?
Same, just the color.
Yeah. So exactly. So the good thing is, I only need to override stuff. I only need to do stuff that I want different in the hover state, right? So now when I hover, wow, it's turning red, but it's not smooth at all. It's just jumping from state 1 to state 2. So if I want the transition to take effect, then what I need to do is write transition, and this is a shorthand property as well. So what it has is transition duration, so how long the transition state should be. So we'll just set that to 1 second. That's really long, by the way. It's normally yeah, exactly. It's normally in milliseconds. So if I could also write 1,000 milliseconds. That's the same as writing 1 second. Let's just write 1 second now to make it easy. Then I need to specify the property that I want to transition. So I can just set this to all, which will go in and figure out everything, all the properties that are changing. So for example, if I say that the font size should actually be 30 pixels on hover, then this will take all of those. Otherwise, if I have different things that change, but I only want some of them to transition and some of them to jump to one state to the other, then I could specify color here. Then font size would jump from one state to the other. And then the last one well, there are more, but the last important one that I always have to specify is the easing function. Easing function is not how fast, but in what way, like how you get to the transition. So, sorry, from state A to state B. So, for example, these are some different easing functions. So you see that here it starts slowly and then gets a bit faster towards the end. That one is the opposite. It starts fast and gets a bit slower. This is sort of like, I don't know, like changes up a bit. So this is basically your physics. So for example, if you have something that's going down on hover or on click, then you will always have to go after that it feels natural, like from a physics point of view. So for example, if something is going down, then it should start slow and fasten up towards the end. If it's the other way around, then it should be the other way around. But you can play around with all of these later on. There are some funny ones. There are some really good websites out there that show you the different easing functions. This one maybe? No. Easing function generator? No. I'll try to find a good one and link to it on Slack. But for now, and actually Google Web Tool, Chrome DevTools has a very good one too. So now, okay, let's just comment it out for now. So now I'm saying that my transition from state 1 to state 2 should last 1 second. It should be the color property that gets transitions, and the easing function is just ease. So now you see that it happens slowly, right? It's if I comment the transition out, then it will jump, right, from one state to the other. If I have the transition, it will do it slowly. That's really nice, but it's really long, right? So this would normally take like 300 milliseconds or something. That's something regular. So it sort of feels like jumping, but still not completely. You still feel a bit of a difference when you are a user on the website. So it's very much about feelings with transitions. If I try to debug this, then I can show you the easing functions. So DevTools, when you are inspecting the anchor, if you click on this little icon, that shows you what easing function you are using. And you can actually grab these circles and play around so you can create this custom easing function, which you can basically paste in. Instead of where I wrote ease, you can write this custom one. It's a cubic Bezier where 4 different properties are specified. It doesn't matter. It's just if you want something custom, you can always just stick to the regular ones. These are ease in, out, ease out sign, all of these different ones. I guess it's easiest to see the difference if you have something moving rather than a color that's changing from one to the other. But yeah, let's try. So now we are transitioning the color. If we did want the font size to change as well, then you see that the color is changing slower than the font size is jumping. Can you see that? Maybe we could make it a bit 700 so you can see it more easily. Can you see that it jumps and then the color changes? Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
That's because we are specifying that it's the color that should be transitioned and nothing else. If we set it to all, then it will happen together.
But can we make like 2 things together instead of all?
Yeah, you can actually do all sorts of weird shit. Like you can say, for example, let's make it this a bit more funky. So let's say we have this block level anchor that has a width of 50%, and let's give it some background color as well. So just so we have a lot to play around with. So it has like this background. You can see that. Okay. Light blue. Is that something? Can you see it? Okay. So let's see that. So I want the background color to change to light green, for example, or just maybe just green on hover. Because I'm specifying all over there, everything is going to be transitioned, right? Now I can also say, okay, I want the width to be 50% of the viewport height. Right? Now it's 50% of my viewport height. So I want the height to change to 25% of the viewport height when I hover. So you see, everything is working together. So if I say that it is actually only the color that I want to transition, then everything else is going to jump besides the color. Do you see that? And that will be super weird. So yeah, you can also get tripped up by transitions if you are doing some weird crap. Yes. You can also specify multiple ones. So if all is not good enough for you, because maybe you want the color to happen faster than the height, right? Then you could say color this, and then you want so the color should change on 300 milliseconds, but the height should change on 700. Then you can just chain them with a comma and a space, right? Then those two will be transitioned, and everything else will still jump because everything else still isn't transitioned.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I transition in 3 stage situation? Like for example, if I want to make over,
Yeah.
so it's like become bigger and come back to the same situation. It's possible to do that?
So you want it to go to state 2, but also come back to state 1 afterwards. Yeah, then it would also be an animation, because an animation, in the animation you have the possibility to do it either from 2, like in a transition properties, or you can do it in percentages. So you can say at 0%, so at the start you want it to be like this, and then at 50% you could say, which is the middle of your animation, you want it to be the to state, and then you can write at 100% you want it to be the from state again. So in that way you could, yeah. But you should always use transitions sensibly. You shouldn't do it just to do it. You should do it because it makes sense. You should always try to go for a good user experience for your users. That's the most important.
And you define the color,
Yeah.
the time for color, and also the time just smooth the edges for height too, right? Is that possible if we just define the font size also in the transition?
Yeah.
If we want to change, when we hover, change the font of
Yeah.
that link.
The font size or the font?
The font family.
The font, you can also, I think, probably. But the properties that you will mostly transition are actually opacity. Do you know what opacity is? So if you want to fade stuff in or fade stuff out, then you would transition the opacity, or you would transition like the positioning of things. So for example, if you want something to come down when it fades in, or to go up again when it fades out, then it would be the positioning that you transition. but this is, I mean, I'm sure you will get familiar with transitions after you have a bit more practice. For now, you should focus on the basics. This is like the cherry on the cake. It's it really isn't that important in the end. Your website will function without transitions, but it will not function if your transitions are great but your layout is shit. So,
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
something you used to sometimes when you have like this navigation, and when you put on one, it's not a link, but there's something less inside.
try to say it again.
Like for example, if you have like menu and you
Yeah.
put in the menu, it's just coming something down,
Yeah,
and that's used transition.
yeah.
Can we try to do that? Or it's like
So if you are
exactly,
doing that,
yeah.
so what's happening there is, I think I need to make this all the way, okay. It gets a bit different when it's, okay, so the way it works depends on your desktop size. So it gets full screen when you're on a smaller desktop. So I needed to zoom out so that it still gets the desktop version. Okay, so here we have, where is the burger menu? Okay, so we have the button here, and then after the button we have all of this content, and you can see that when the menu is hidden, so when you have clicked on when you have not clicked on the button yet, then it is actually, the menu is display none, and it's and it's also transformed. Where is it transformed?
It's like
Yeah, so it's, okay, did you see it before, the transform? There should, yeah, that one. So it's transformed up 100%. Okay, we can do a very, very quick example with that one. So let's say we have a div and we have a some text in there. Oh. So you want to transition stuff up and down, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have this div, and we say that this should be 50% of the width, and it should have a margin top of 200 and a margin left of 30%. Great. So I want the paragraph to transition down, or what?
like I want a button, when you put that, it's coming like this down. Or when you,
So you want to show content when you click on a button?
yeah, or something like that. Or we use that for that form.
Okay, then we can say we have this button. We'll do a super quick example. That's the button there, right?
Yeah.
We'll say the button. Okay, if I want the button to be on the top right corner, how would I get it to be there? Can you help me?
To the right.
Yeah, flex end. Yeah, I could, but then I would need to have a parent for it, right?
Align like text align.
Should I try that? Text align right? Nope. That works on inline now. What about positioning?
Yeah.
Yeah, what would I do then? Position what? Yeah, position. Yeah, but position what? As a top 0 and right 0. That's fine. But can you remember what positions there are? Absolute, relative, absolute. Yeah, fixed. So position absolute, top 0, right 0. Then it gets over there. Okay, that will be fine. So what I want is, I want the paragraph to slide down when I click on the button. Okay, Then I'm going to use some jQuery, which is not something you use anymore, but it's very easy. So I'm just gonna say I will load it in to to CodePen. So now I can select my button by doing this, and then I can say on click I want the button to, no, I want the div, because now I need some JavaScript, because now it's not hover anymore, it's two states, and the div needs to get into an active state when I have clicked on the button, right?
Okay.
So I need to select my div, and I need to toggle class active on it. So whenever I click on the button, the div, if it doesn't have the class active, will get the class active. If it has the class active, it will get remove the class active, right? Okay, should we try to see if that happens? So we'll just say that if my div has the class active, just to test that it works, right? Then I want it to get a red background. So if I click here, great, it gets the red background, it's working. So what I'm gonna do is I want my div, this is my before state, right? I want my div to have an opacity of 0. That fades it out, great. So I want, when it's active, I don't want the red background anymore. I want it to be opacity 1, right? I want it to fade it in. So if I click now, it will fade in, great. But it's still sort of jumping, right? Why is that?
So the time delay.
And what's missing here?
Transmission.
The transition. Yeah, there is no transition. So I want the transition. Do you remember what properties I need to specify? Millisecond, yeah. So that's the duration. So we can say we just set it to 500 milliseconds. And we can just say oh yeah, and then just each, yeah. Great. So let's say, ooh, fades it in. Nice. So let's say I also want it to come down, right? So I could use positioning for that. I could also use margin for that. But the best property to use for this is something called transform. And transform has, again, a lot of different properties. There is one called translate. It's super weird. I have no idea why it's called translate. But there you can translate the x-axis and the y-axis. Now, because we are doing vertical stuff, it's the y-axis. So the from state here in our case is going to be 0, because that's just going to be the original positioning of it, right? But when we, or actually no, we want when it is active, that's where we want it to be the actual position, right? When the from state, where it should come from, that should be transformed up a bit. So we will say that it should be minus 100%, which means that compared to its width, it should move its own width up. So if I say minus, it will be transformed up on the y-axis. If I say just 100%, what do you think that means?
Down.
Yeah, exactly, down, 100% down from its original position. So we say it starts from minus 100% of its own positioning and ends at where it should be, where it's originally meant to be. So if I click on the button, it will go up. If I click on the button, it will come down. Yeah? Yeah. So that's a very, very, very simple example of how this works. Okay. So lunch? All right.